Hi, good evening everybody, and welcome to the daily Rambam Shiur, lesson 157, 158, Hilchos Issurei Mizbeiach, from chapter 2 till chapter 7. Right now we are standing in a very auspicious time between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. Chazal are teaching this is the time that it is a sin-free zone. Since each and every Jew, he is busy only in doing mitzvahs, build himself a sukkah, get himself a lulav and Issurei, daled minim, and for that reason, it says in the Torah about the mitzvah of lulav, ulkachtem lochem bayom orishon, shake the lulav at the first day, the first, doesn't say first, the first. What is so special about being first? Rishon lecheshbon avonos. It is the first day of actually accumulating sins. What happens to the days before Sukkot? So the answer is this: between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, everybody is busy with doing mitzvah. While we are busy with doing mitzvahs, it is very important not to get caught in a situation where a person actually makes what is called a mitzvah habo ba'avero. It is a mitzvah, however it is associated with a sin. And this is a very interesting comment that Zalman, my son, brought to my attention. Since the source of mitzvah habo ba'avero, what is prohibited, comes from Maseches Sukkos, this tractate in the Talmud that deals with the idea of Sukkos, and over there the roots of the prohibition of, let's say, bringing a stolen esrog, a stolen lulav. How do I know that it is forbidden? Since it is written, Vahaveisem es hapiseach, the prophet gives Musar to the Eden. How come they bringing as an offering something that is not right, something that is damaged, something that is defected? So same way as a piseach, a animal that is defected, has no solution, same way if a person brings a stolen lulav and esrog, has no solution as well. And for that reason, this is the subject of the entire chapter today: how careful and how selective a person should be when he is bringing the offering. What type of problems can turn the so-called mitzvah that he is doing into a mitzvah habo be'avero. Our sages explaining as well that the logical explanation, how come if a person has done a good deed but with the actual assistance of something wrong, which is a mitzvah ba'avero, why would it be forbidden? So they introduce in the Yerushalmi a logical svore. What is the logical svore? Ein kategor nase sanegor. In a courthouse, someone who is a prosecuting cannot be turning to be a defense. For that reason, we have just celebrated Yom Kippur, and we read the avodah the high priest used to do on the temple, and every time he used to enter to the holiest of holy, he removed the bigdei zohov, the golden garments, and he placed bigdei lovon. For what reason? Bigdei zohov is a category, is a reminder of the greatest sin of all, of the sin of the golden calf. For that reason, he was removing the bigdei zohov and he was entering to the kodesh hakodoshim only with bigdei lovon. Today is also a very, very special day. We are marking a Yotzeit, the 141st Yortzeit of the Rebbe Maharash. He is the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe, known in his famous slogan, Lechatchile Ariber. We will elaborate a little bit further about this concept towards the end. Why is he so special? Since the beginning of this particular cycle of the Rambam that right now we are in started in the day of his birthday. Beis Iyar was the beginning of that cycle of the Rambam that we are right now in, and today we are zoiche to mark the day of his Yortzeit. So in the first chapter of the first lesson of today, the Rambam is displaying all defects that will disqualify an animal from being offered as a offering. Some of them we were introduced when we were covering those damages, defects that will disqualify a Kohen from serving in the temple. When it comes to an animal, a specific distinction must be made between what we called a mum kovua, a permanent defect. Some are considered to be mum oivel, a temporary defect. For example, certain moles or watery eyes, they can be what we call oivel. There is a third category that it's neither of them. However, the reason that we won't bring the animal because it don't falls under the category of mivchar nedorecho, the best of your offering, the best of your oath. For example, if an animal, the teeth of the animal happens to be slightly damaged, or some of the horns were chopped, though the majority of the horn still exist, nevertheless you cannot refer to this animal as mivchar, as the best of your offerings. For that reason, in such a situation, the animal cannot be redeemed because it's not really a defect that will disqualify her. On the other hand, it cannot be brought as an offering. So the ruling will be in such a case, tir'eh, she should go around together with the rest of the animals until a permanent damage will occur by her, and only then she will be redeemed. If an animal turned to be what we called a treifo, an internal blemish, or a blemish in her internal organs, such a problem that will be considered a treifo, a situation that she won't be able to make it more than 12 months. So such an animal, I'm not going to redeem the animal, though it is obviously a permanent damage. Nevertheless, since what will be the result of redemption? Anyway, she won't be able to be eaten. The only way, she will be given to the dogs. So there is a ruling that prohibits to redeem the animal for the purpose to supply her to the dogs. So for that reason, I will let such an animal who turned to be treifo to go in the field until it dies, and then they will be buried. So this is an exception where an animal is indeed a Baal Mum, but nevertheless I will not apply the usual protocol that will generally be applied to a Baal Mum. Redemption, no, it will just going to be buried. In the second chapter of today's Rambam, he deals about offerings, bird offerings. A bird doesn't have to be a tomim, which means in a perfected condition. However, any type of a bird that is missing a limb, he will be disqualified. Also, a dove who is too small, or Bnei Yoino type of doves who are too big, will be disqualified, since the Torah itself specified there is only a possibility to bring from a turtle dove or an ordinary dove. Anything that is not part of a turtle dove or ordinary dove will be disqualified from a korban. And there is also a sign, a signal to know until what point a dove will be kosher, as long as you will be able to pull out a wing and the roots of the wing will be filled up with blood. Today, when we say the word corruption, we generally will associate with politics, with any type of scandals. The word corruption in the context of the Bible, of the Torah, is associated or with incest or with idol worship. How do I know? Because specifically, when it says about incest, which were very popular at the times of the generation of the flood, the Torah tells God Almighty saw ki hishchis kol bosor esdar koya la'oretz. He saw how everybody have corrupted their way, every flesh was corrupting their way, and over there obviously it was the problem of incest. Then when God Almighty refers to Moshe Rabbeinu at the time that the Jews committed the golden calf, lech reid ki shicheis amcho, that your nation have corrupted their way. For that reason, since the Torah rejects a possibility where an offering would be corrupted, and it's not clear what is corruption in that context, so the only way for us to figure out, when we see a similar terminology somewhere in the Torah, that will interpret what does it mean corruption that will prohibit a offering to be kosher. So for that reason, any type of a offering that was served as a idol worship, it's called ne'ebad, or any type of a animal that was involved in incest, will be disqualified from bringing as a korban. As well, if a animal was involved by harming a person to death, killing a person, it will also going to be disqualified as a korban as well. So any involvement of an animal in those three aveiros, gilui arayos, shfichus domim, and avodah zarah, will disqualify him from a korban. Though it is forbidden to bring or to dedicate such animals to a korban, nevertheless a person who went ahead and brought them and dedicated them as a korban, he will be exempt from malchus, since the azhoro, the outright warning, is not appearing in the Torah. On the other hand, there is two types of situation where may appear slightly less severe, that a person will get malchus, and this is what we call esnan umechir kelev. If a person paid a fee for a whore, so this fee that the whore received for the act of the aveiro will be prohibited to bring as a korban. Or another situation where a person have exchanged a dog with another object, let it be cash, let it be any form of a thing, so the exchange item that he has exchanged the dog with will be prohibited. There is another requirement as far as offering goes, to bring them only from the 8th day of their birth. Any attempt to bring it earlier will be forbidden. In fact, the animal will be called mechusser zman. He is prematurely, he is lacking the proper time. Nevertheless, if a person went ahead and brought it, he's not going to get lashes, since the prohibition came in a format of a positive commandments, not as a love, not as a negative commandments, but ba'asei. So any violation of asei is not involved with malchus. There is a prohibition for a person to bring also an animal that it's not clear whether it is male or female, and it comes in two forms, or as a androgynous or as a tumtum. Androgynous, that he has both male and female genitalia, reproductive organs. If there is no clarity what organ he possesses, since it's covered, so there is no visual way to detect whether he is male or female, it's called tumtum. So a person is forbidden to bring it as a offering. However, if a person went ahead and brought whether a androgynous, whether a tumtum or a treifo, there is no holiness being triggered, and it's basically exactly as he brought woods or any chairs to the Mizbeiach, that there is no actual kedushas domim, no holiness being attached to them, and for that reason he should just sell them and bring with their funds a korban. But let's say if a person went ahead and brought an animal that a incest was done, or it was served to avodah zarah, so there is kedusha upon them, and therefore they must yiru, they must be under the supervision of a shepherd until a permanent mum will appear in them, and they will be redeemed. So towards the end of this chapter, the Rambam summarizes what is the Yad Psulim. Yad is 14 disqualification of an animal. An animal that is a Baal Mum, has a defect. We covered already all the defect. An animal that he is not considered to be min hamuvcho, as we brought before the example, that he cannot say that he is from the best if he is missing an internal organ, or he became a treifo, kil'aim, that he came from different type of species, though both of them may be kosher, but nevertheless, if he was not born, he was born in a caesarean C-section, it's called yoitze doifen, and if an avero incest was done with him, if he killed a person, if he was served as avodah zarah, if he was designated to avodah zarah, if it was served as exchange for a service by a whore, if it was exchanged for a dog, and if it is prematurely brought before the 8th day. All those prohibited animals, even if one of them have mixed in 10,000 other kosher animals, and I don't know which one of those 10,000 animals is the problematic one, all of them will be prohibited. Despite the fact that there is always a possibility when I'm going to the marketplace to buy an animal, who knows what is his past record, who knows what was his past history. Nevertheless, until proven otherwise, the presumption that it will be kosher. How do I know it? From an interesting story, everybody is familiar how King Shaul have lost his kingdom. One of the reasons for him not following the order of Shmuel Hanavi to wipe out the nation of Amalek, because he felt it will be much more beneficial to take their animals as spoil and bring them to the temple. And the Rambam used the quotation of King Shaul in his response to the criticism that was given to him by Prophet Shmuel. Why did you left them alive? And he says, Chomal ho'om al meitav hatzoin leman zvoyach lashem Elokecho. The nation had mercy upon the entire cattle in order to bring them to God Almighty. So here is a proof that the issue of this issue was not an issue. It was a different issue that he was not following. So we see over here a very interesting halacha that the Rambam derives from the Haftorah of Shabbos Zocher. In the final chapter, the Rambam goes to a very specific resolution. What is the age that required to determine that an animal was really associated with an incest act? How old the partner, male or female, must be? What is the level of witnesses that necessary to determine that the animal actually killed another human being in order to disqualify him from a korban? So generally you gotta have two eidim, you gotta have two witnesses, otherwise you cannot disqualify them. There is a very interesting, we spoke before, that if an animal happened to be an object of idol worship, it will be disqualified. There is a very interesting ruling that anything natural, unartificial, which means that a human being have not touched it. It's halacha in Avodah Zorah. We covered it when we learned Hilchos Avodah Zorah. If a person bow down to a mountain, the mountain is not prohibited. Nevertheless, when it comes to bring a korban, those stones of the mountains will be disqualified to use them as building material for the Mizbeiach. Because when it comes to take an item towards the temple, the expectation and the standards, the requirement are way higher than generally speaking. In the lesson 158, so the Rambam covers a few more problems when it comes to flour offering. Anything that is made out of slightest amount of leavening agent or sweet entity, it is prohibited, as we are reading always before our prayers. The chiddush over here that even if a person brought to the fire, which on top of the Mizbeiach, something that should be eaten, it's not roi le'aktore, like the bsar, hachatoes, hashlomim, or kodshim kalim. Nevertheless, he still violated naveiro, since it says kol seir, any possibility, even though it's not really a aktor. As we said before, as we started this year, that anything that is stolen or robbed, it is prohibited. But there is one exception. If the bailim, the original owners, they were nisiyaesh, they gave up, they already expressed verbally, vaide lechisor in kis, forget about it. So in such a case, by the change of the reshus plus the yush, theoretically and practically, a person would allow to bring it as a hekdesh. However, if it is known publicly that this item is robbed or stolen, despite the yush of the bailim, it will be forbidden, because takonas Mizbeiach, which is also reminds a famous story that the Rebbe, I think it was a Fabrengen of Vov Tishrei or Gimel Tishrei, that the Rebbe shared the entire story of Miriam Bas Bilgo, where she was criticizing the entire Mizbeiach, Lukus, Ad Mosayato Mechalem Maon Noam shel Yisrael. So there is an element of a Mizbeiach, not to embarrass him, not to Talking about korbanos, a must ingredient that was always associated and attached to every korban is the salt. And this is also very well connected with the Simchas Beis HaShoevo. One of the reasons why they marked such a great festival around drawing the water from the well of the Shiloach with greatest simcha, because they were marking a comfort that God Almighty, when God Almighty have on Monday, when He made a separation between Maim Atachtoinim and Maim Ho'elyoinim, He created the Rokia, the sky, where they have the Maim Elyoinim and the water of the sea, which is called the Maim Atachtoinim. So obviously, the inferior water, which is the water that are on the planet, they came with a taine, with a complaint. How come we are the unfortunate one who left over here lemato to be inferior? So God Almighty says, I will comfort you. Basically, the greatest source of salt is from the Maim Atachtoinim, the water of the sea. They are salty. I'll make sure no korban would be able to be brought without a grain of salt. Ideally, it should be covered entirely with lots of salt. But b'di'evet, after the fact, even gargir echod, even 1 grain of salt, makes the korban kosher. In the second chapter of the final lesson, the Rambam deals about the importance to bring the korbanos from the best of the best. Wine should never be smoking, no worm should be in the flour. Talking over here about the water of Simchas Beis HaShoevo, if the water that's supposed to be brought upon and poured upon the Mizbeiach, they became tomei. So if before the dedication he can go and be toivel them, he can make an entire tvila, dipping them into pure water that they are not tomei. But let's say if they became tomei later, so kivon shenitchu itchu. So it's a very important comment that I heard from Zalman Sheikhie, that in the times of Golus, the relevance of Tum'o and Taharo, in the times of the temple, the relevance of ritual purity and impurity was on each and every aspect of their life. But today, in the times of Golus, there is only 3 relevance of the phenomena of purity and impurity. And all of them are associated with our state in these days. First is about Sukkot, to determine what type of material will be kosher for a schach. So there is a test. If it is mekabel tumo, if it's susceptible to become ritually impure, it is disqualified for a schach. A second one, Kohanim, high priest, needs to distance themselves from tumas meis. So a second relevance. A third relevance is mikveh, in order to be toivel. And we see precisely in these days,
I found this on the web for relevance in order to check it out.
In these days of the Rambam, we are studying the rules of Bias Mikdosh, the Kohanim, in what state of Tahara they need to be. We're studying over here, we are before Sukkos, which we are studying the idea of, again, preparing our schach in accordance to Tumah v'Tahara. And again, the Rambam of today speaks about the Simchas Beis HaShoevo, those water who become tomei, in what form of a mikveh they should be metahel. The last chapter of the second lesson covers the unique quality of the offering. For example, they used to bring rams from Moab, sheep from Hebron, calf from Sharon. At the meantime, you're getting an idea where to get high quality of those animals. He covers also the entire protocol, how they were preparing the flowers for the oimer and for shtei alechem, how many claps and how many shakes and how many grinds. It's astronomical amount of number in order to produce the most refined and best flour to be in the korban. And towards the end, the Rambam gives and concludes with a very interesting sentence, which I think ties in what we spoke before, that the slogan, the theme of the Rebbe Maharash was Lechatchile Hariber. Lechatchile Hariber, to think outside the comfort zone, to think outside the box, to be able to make the real leap into way higher imagination on your own, which comes from your own terms, to think outside of it. So here the Rambam says, why was it necessary to count and to describe how many levels of oil were used for the menorah, for the flower offerings, and other types in the temple? The reason, although all of them are kosher for the flower offering, why they were counting the different levels? In order to teach us that a person who wants to refine himself and extend his hand, and he will bring his korban from the best in the kind of whatever he brings. And he refers in the Torah, it says about Hevel and Cain. Both of them brought their offerings. Nevertheless, God have turned to the offerings of Hevel and not to the offerings of Cain, because he made the effort and the point to introduce the highest quality possible. And anything that is towards God Almighty should be from the best and the most beautiful. If he builds a shul, it should be nicer from his own house. If he fed a hungry person, he should select the sweetest and the best on his table. If he covers a naked man, he should find him the most beautiful garments. And if he dedicates something to God Almighty, he should find the best and the most beautiful in his assets. And it says in the Torah, Kol chaylev lashem. Anything of the fats should be towards God. Thank you very much. Shana tova.
Thank you.